Right. Thanks, everybody, pouring in right now. Good to see you. We're actually just 1 minute before the hour. We'll start. Oh, actually, it's on the hour now. So let's start and people can keep pouring in. So first off, I want to start this the way that I always like to by thanking you for taking time out of your busy day. I know you've got other ways you could be spending your time, other things you could be doing. So thank you for spending that time with me. Um, Second thing, we're going to go through just a little bit of housekeeping here, but I want to remind you to always ask questions in the Q&A. Don't hesitate. We'll look at those at the end. Um, and yeah, just a funny little thing here. You might notice that this presentation says SMX Munich on there. This was originally presented last month, a month ago at Munich, and this is kind of a online encore, you could say, to bring this to a larger audience. And yeah, I just want to also encourage you, like, check out SMX Advanced in October, or excuse me, in September. I think they moved it from last year. But no affiliation here. I just want to say these great events are great. If you like content like what I'm presenting right now, there were tons of other talks and other content just like this at SMX Munich, and there'll be a lot more SMX Advanced. I think a lot of conferences kind of went away during the pandemic and afterwards. And so I really appreciate when people support these events. Then just a quick word about myself and the company that I work for. My name is Mike, and yeah, I've held a variety of roles in retail in the past, everything from like stocking shelves and driving a forklift to working in purchasing, working with electronic catalogs, doing delivery, logistics, fun stuff like that. And then everything changed several years ago when I moved to Austria. And that's when I got into e-commerce specifically. And I've loved every minute of it since. And most of that's been Google Ads. And I'll tell you something really cool that's been going on this year because it connects back to this topic. I've been talking lately with journalists like at the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, Modern Retail, Business Insider. And what's so cool is that the thing that I've been talking to them about is auction insights. Actually, I've been explaining to them what auction insights are and helping them understand companies like Temu and TikTok, Shein. And so it's just a reminder of how powerful auction insights are. But before we get into the topic, one last word just about smarter e-commerce. That's like this very cool company that I work for, and I'm in a super kind of privileged position because I'm really standing on the shoulders of so many smart people and so many years of experience at this company. The company's been around for 16 years. I've only been there for 7 of those years. And so, yeah, I feel really privileged to be around all these smart people and great customers that we have. So I've got this kind of abstract image here. This is a doorway from our office, our headquarters in Linz, Austria. And let's view that as a doorway into the content now. So we're going to cover 3 main areas, and that's basically ways of thinking about auction insights. What are they? How can we work with them? And we'll get deeper into that when we talk about applications of auction insights. And then we'll look at an area that I'm calling friendly fire here as well, because auction insights are not only competitive. There's also things you can learn about other lines of your business and other partners that you work with. Just see a couple of questions rolling in already. Thanks for that. Someone's asking if I'll send out the deck. I should say no, so that you stay through. But yes, we will send out the deck and the recording. But stick with us so you can join the Q&A live. And someone's asking about increasing the volume. I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I can change the volume. If your system settings are okay. Sorry about that. Before we get into point 1, ways of thinking, let's start with a preface here. I want to kind of orient us about the topic that we're going to look at today, because this is specifically about auction insights for e-commerce businesses, and it's specifically about these shopping auctions. So I bet you haven't seen this schematic before. I'm going to zoom in because it's probably quite small, not that readable. But that little map pin, that is the area out of all this that we're talking about. So where this image comes from is from the documentation for Google Meridian. That is a new marketing mix modeling tool from Google. And this is basically Google's own map of their own auction environment. And you can see that it's split between YouTube and search, display, and also AI-powered campaigns like PMax or Discovery or Demand Gen. And then there's all these subsets of auctions types. You know, there are reserve auctions, and there's you know, there are these campaign-based auctions. And we are talking really about the search auctions and a subset of that, the PLAs, the product listing ads, shopping ads, whether those are served by standard shopping campaigns or PMax, it doesn't matter. But that's the area that we're looking at today. So it might seem, I mean, it is very specific. It's one thing out of this whole map of auctions. But another way of thinking about this, if you would make this, instead of this kind of branching tree diagram, if you would make it like a weighted tree diagram, and you would follow where advertising spend is flowing through this diagram, it would be very unequal. And a lot of that cost or spend is flowing through these PLA auctions, Google Shopping auctions. It's a very significant category of auctions in Google Ads. And I know there are e-commerce businesses that have like 80% of their revenue coming through Google Ads. So it's significant. It's a huge environment. It's billions of dollars or euros or pounds. It's significant for individual advertisers. And we've seen some very interesting behavior going on there. As I mentioned, businesses like Temu earlier, as these businesses try to kind of find out what benefit they can get from the auctions as well. But now that we've just kind of set the scene there about what part of the auction we're talking about, I want to get into ways of thinking. So first, at a kind of a higher sort of philosophical level, I mean, I'm fascinated in auctions because they're basically the single smallest part of this whole advertising ecosystem, and it's where everything happens. It's where you know, your products and your audience targeting are meeting bids and other competitors, and Google's audience graph and Google's shopping graph, the way that they map products and users, it's all coming together in this place. And it's all happening at an insanely huge scale and an insanely fast pace. The amount of auctions per second is just mind-blowing. Now, this is largely steered by AI now. I mentioned Google's graphs. Okay, I'm getting another feedback that the volume is low. Not sure if I can change that, but I'm sorry, I don't know how to quite check that right now. The sound check was good earlier. That's all I can say. Yeah, so at any rate, this is happening at a very, very fast pace, and this algorithmic process that's happening there, it's not strategic. It's not smart in that way. You know, it considers all kinds of factors like your pricing, for example. Pricing is a factor that is, hold on, I'm just gonna check my audio settings because someone's telling me I can turn my volume up in there. Is this better? Give me a thumbs up or thumb down. Hopefully that's better. I just found a slider and I cranked it all the way to the top. Let's see. All right, but let's not get too sidetracked here. Where was I? Oh yeah, so I mean, yes, price is a signal. Of course, price is going to correlate with the expected click-through rate, and it's going to, you know, consumers are looking for good prices. A big part of the function of Google Shopping is as a price comparison engine. And so it's important, but it's also not strategic because, you know, it's not thinking about what kind of customers are you acquiring by changing your price. It's not thinking about what's happening to your margins when your pricing is at a certain level. So there's still this need for humans to take a much higher strategic level look than what these algorithms can do on a per auction basis. Now, when we talk about auction insights for PLAs, shopping ads, there are three metrics that are included there: overlap rate, outranking share, and impression share. And in my experience, when I talk with advertisers, when I hear people in the industry talking, when I see things written on LinkedIn or Twitter or wherever, I feel like a lot of attention goes toward impression share. People are obsessing over their competitors' impression share. Now, I actually, surprise, surprise, this 1, 2, 3 list here is actually a ranked list of how important these are, in my opinion, or what order you should look at them in. Because I think impression share is way overhyped. I don't care too much what a competitor's impression share is. So first, there's overlap rate, and it answers the question, how often are we going head to head with a given competitor, percentage-wise? And then the next is outranking share. How often am I in a stronger position? And so those two things to me are really the meat or the core of what's happening. You know, am I outranking them or are they outranking me? And how often is this occurring? That is the measure of really competition there. The impression share, as I've written, it's kind of a sense of, yeah, how changeable is this situation? How heavy is this stone? You know, when you see a lower impression share, yes, it's indicative of the bid, the budget, how many products they've got live in this category, perhaps. But I wouldn't read too much into it. But it's kind of an indicator of the kind of the inertia of the situation. So I came up with this framework to take these three metrics and be able to look at all of them at once. And basically, on the horizontal or x-axis, you've got the overlap rate from low to high. And on the y-axis, the vertical axis, you've got that outranking share. But I've inverted it. I've inverted that axis because, you know, to me, overlap rate, it shows kind of how often a competitor is going head to head with you. Impression share, it shows how robust their bid and budget is. And then outranking share shows how strong you are. And I think it's kind of easier if we view them all in the same way. So I invert it so that we're seeing how often a competitor is outranking you, how often are they overlapping with you, and what is their impression share. So to put this in a nutshell, a competitor that is up and to the right in this quadrants analysis here is going to be stronger. They're going to be overlapping you more often. They're going to be outranking you more often. And then the impression share, you can choose to include it or not as the bubble radius. And it can give you, like, it's what I love about these bubble charts is that you can have several metrics here. You can then also bring in like a color code, for example, and categorize these different competitors. If you like, we'll look at an example of that later on. If you're dealing with a lot of competitors in one view, or depending on how you've structured your data, you might want to take away the size, the radius of that bubble and just look at a classic scatter plot. But I want to make that a little more practical, that framework, and show you what this looks like with real data in there. So here you can see an advertiser's competitors mapped onto that framework over there. This is at a very high level. It's at the level of a year. So it's a way of showing you generally what is the position of my competitors relative to me. And you can see that Amazon is, you know, overlapping like 2/3 of the time, and they're outranking more than half of the time. And they've got a very large impression share for what it's worth. So it's hard to move that stone. It's a heavy stone. I've anonymized some of these other competitors on here, but if you see this pale greenish type blue-green turquoise dot, that's Temu. So you can see that for this advertiser, Temu, despite all the hype, is hardly there on an annualized basis. They're very kind of ephemeral. They're just like a speck of dust floating around compared to other competitors. And so this is just a way of getting an overview of all three of those core metrics of Auction Insights in one glimpse. Then another thing that I like to do is to create a metric that calculates all three of those at once, because then you can do other things with that, like view it as a time series. So I'll show you how this is calculated on the next slide. But in a nutshell, competitor power is the average of those three metrics. It is the average of the inverse outranking share, the overlap rate, and the impression share. And then you can see how that is developing over time. So, for example, like this yellow line, you see that they started ramping up in November for the holiday period. They got a lot stronger relative to you. You can see that Temu popped on the map and that they did build strength over time. It's just a way of looking at a high level, how is a competitor evolving over time? So just to explain these two custom metrics, I mentioned inverse outranking and competitor power. Again, I find that inverse outranking is more aligned with the other metrics. It's my, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I find it easier to think of that or to hold that in my mind with the other metrics. And it's very simple. You just take 1 minus the outranking share, and that is your inverse outranking. The competitor power, as I mentioned, it's the average of these other ones. So it's the average of the impression share, the overlap rate, and the inverse outranking share, 1 minus outranking. And these are the formulas as you would put them in Excel. Unfortunately, these custom metrics cannot be added as like custom columns in Google Ads because auction insights data is not available to custom columns. But you could use it as a calculated column in Looker, in Google Sheets, and so on and so forth. At the end, you can use that. Question arises, so what? Like, does it matter if a competitor's moving up the axis on impression share? Does it matter if someone's outranking me or not? And it's a good question. How do these metrics correlate to performance? Can we do something with them? How are they going to affect my actual account? So what I've made here, this is one of the more technical slides, but this is called a correlogram, and I'll explain to you how to read one in case you never saw one before. Basically, and I know it might be less readable right now, but you'll, as mentioned at the start, you'll get these slides. It's showing these auction metrics like competitor impression share, overlap rate, outranking share, and then also a series of performance metrics like click-through rates, cost per click, etc. And it compares every metric against every other metric. That's what comes out of this grid, including itself. So that's why you'll see this line of red right down the middle. That's where, if you follow that down, that's where CPM meets with CPM. There's a perfect correlation there. And that's where the color scale comes into effect here. I used a cold to warm color scale. So blue indicates that's cold. That indicates an opposite correlation or inverse correlation. White means there's no correlation at all. And red means that there's a strong correlation and all the gradients in between. So I just want to call out a few points of interest on here. The first one that I've highlighted up here is the correlation between overlap rate and competitor impression share. And yeah, we typically see that a competitor's impression share will correlate to their overlap with you. So, you're going to see those two movements, those two numbers generally move in the same direction as each other. What I find even more interesting, though, is that your impression share correlates almost perfectly with your outranking share. And we'll look at that in more detail in the next slide. Now, when you're talking about correlation, you know this, you've seen memes about it maybe, or you've heard it drilled in. Correlation is not causation. Correlation is not causation. And we'll look at that in a second, but it's just a reminder. It doesn't necessarily mean that, you having a higher impression share causes you to have a higher outranking share. They might be both downstream of something else. If we look at conversion rates, we see that basically there's a moderate correlation, positive correlation between conversion rate and your competitor's impression share and your overlap with competitors. So what that means, like, let's think about that. There's a moderately positive correlation between conversion rate and overlap rate. That means that on auction, on like in campaigns and different levels, when you're overlapping more with a competitor, the conversion rate is higher, and it suggests that that's a product of smart bidding, basically. That smart bidding is pushing you and the competitor toward those higher value auctions. And so basically, competition is higher on these higher conversion rate auctions. We also, if we look at average cost per click, I'm also going to show you a little bit of this on the next slide too. One dimension of this, we can see that there's a moderate correlation between, for example, cost per click and outranking share, cost per click and impression share. And you can view this as chicken or the egg. Like when you have a higher CPC, it's going to allow you to outrank more. That's logical. And it costs more to outrank. I mean, it's basically, you can view in either direction. So we'll drill into two of those correlations, just to have a look at what this can look like. Here is on the left-hand chart that nearly perfect correlation I mentioned between outranking share and your own impression share. It's not your competitor's impression share, your impression share. So basically, you can see that they move almost in lockstep with each other. As you increase your impression share, you'll increase your outranking share. As you increase your outranking share, you'll increase your impression share. And it just suggests to me that there's that the things that benefit outranking are the same as the things that benefit impression share. So when you're optimizing your bid, when you're increasing your budget or optimizing your budget, you are going to advance both of those things. Now, what I want to mention is that in that upper right-hand corner, like you might think, oh, that's great. I should have more aggressive bids, or I should unlock more budget, or I should try to max those things out. I want to outrank my competitors. I want to capture as many impressions as I possibly can that I'm eligible for. But I think it's worth remembering that at that top level, you could find that it's less incremental up there. You could find that that those auctions are very generic at the top, or that suddenly you're competing an awful lot with Amazon or Temu up at the top of the auction, and you might find that it's less profitable to go up to the very top of those metrics. So I think everything in moderation here. You want to be competitive. You don't necessarily want to be maxing things out unless you can afford to, unless if it's your business model. If we look at the right-hand chart, we'll see the outranking share on the vertical axis and cost per click on the horizontal axis. And there's also, I have the R squared value for this, which is 0.29. And that means that 29% of the variation in outranking share is explained by variation in cost per click. So it shows you that cost per click is responsible for a good part of outranking, not all of it. There'll be other things in there, like your price, for example. You can see how different these two intersections are. I mean, in both cases, we've got outranking on the y-axis, but how they relate to other metrics is totally different. And I think that's interesting and worth studying. So that's all like kind of technical, kind of theoretical. We can get into some more concrete applications at this point. A little preface to that is a question of how can I access auction insights data in Google Ads? What tools can I work with? And auction insights is not the friendliest data to work with, actually. It's not well supported by the API. It is available in Looker Studio. I'm not going to recommend this way of doing it, but a way that I work with auction insights a lot, if I need custom things, I mean, first off, I rarely use the standard UI reporting that you'll find, like in a campaign view, for example. I go to the report editor and I build my own reports there. So you just go to the reports tab, predefined reports, like your auction insights. You can choose search auction insights or shopping auction insights. And then it'll put a basic report into place there. You can customize it from there. And you can also switch to a chart view from there. Or what I like to do is export this stuff. So if you're doing a one-time analysis or custom analysis, it can make sense to export this into Sheets or Excel. And then, if you want to do something more robust, if you find, okay, that's an insight I want again, you could build that in Looker Studio. Or I've got one more view on this. This is from this good-looking fellow here, and also very smart, Stefan A. Fisher. No affiliation, but he has a really great blog article that I've linked. When you get the slides, you'll see the link in there. And you can also just Google it, Google Payment4 and Auction Insights, you'll find it. But he explains how you can do more custom builds on this stuff if the demand is there. I mean, I don't understand this diagram. I'm not a data engineer. I'm an analyst, not an engineer. But if you want a detailed walkthrough of what reporting possibilities are possible, or how to pipeline that, you can check out Stefan's blog post. It's really a great resource. But as I mentioned, I like to use a reports editor. And when you go in there, you're going to see that a lot of stuff is grayed out. A lot of dimensions you might want to work with, a lot of metrics you might want to work with. Again, there's sadly low compatibility between Auction Insights and many others. And the reason why is that one of the core pieces of Auction Insights, in the case of PLAs, it'll be the store display name. So that's the competitor. That's Amazon.com or Amazon.co.uk or whoever. And they're not going to tell you, sadly, like what amount of costs flowed into auctions against Amazon, for example. But there are a lot of dimensions and metrics that are available. So the dimensions, some that I like to work with are time. You can, as I've written here, you can go very granular all the way down to daily, sadly not hourly, and all the way up to yearly. And this can offer you really different views. Like earlier on, I showed you a yearly snapshot on that matrix of where competitors were placed. And then I also showed like, I think it was, I can't remember, a monthly view over the course of the year. So you can see these different views. Day of week is super interesting, but it's not kind of natively supported. But all you have to do is export a data set that has daily data in it, and then you can pivot it. A lot of what I do with Auction Insights is as simple as pivot tables. As I said, I'm not a data engineer. If I can do this stuff, you can too. Pivot tables are your friend. If you haven't worked with pivot tables before, today's the perfect time to start. They're not scary. They work great. But yeah, you can also do period over period, and there's a lot of stuff that you can do with time. So just to give you a couple, I just want to inspire you with a couple of examples. Like here, I've looked at Amazon.co.uk, and you can look at whatever metric you want here. You can look at their impression share or their, overlap, whatever. I am looking at competitor power, that custom metric I told you about before. And we can see like, what is the 2022 median in this case? It's a little bit of an older data set. Yeah, so you can see like they're significantly stronger on their summer prime event, and you can make a decision based on that. Can I afford to go head to head with Amazon? You can also look which categories were they strongest in last time. Were they hitting me hard in certain categories or others? Do I want to defend that ground, or do I want to scale back and be more conservative on a key day like their summer prime event? So you can look to the past to try to predict what are they going to do in the future. This is something that anyone can do. In my case, this is like a benchmark based on a lot of advertisers, but you can also do it based on your own account data from last year or whenever. This is another chart about some of these very large players, and it's just showing kind of that shocking rise of Temu. It's showing how dominant Amazon is, and it's showing what happened to Wish over time. So it's just a reminder that you can look at pretty long time series through these custom reports. And just drill that down to the quarterly level, and you'll get a nice smooth view of how something is changing over the course of years. Like that's the type of thing that can be interesting to your executive team. Like these more daily tactical things or what's going on in summer prime event. This is perhaps more tactically relevant. And these bigger pictures looking at quarterly developments might be more strategic. So I'm just inviting you to think like, what is the right level I want to look at here? Because there are implications of looking at a quarter versus a day, of course. And there's just, here's a more zoomed in thing of Temu versus Amazon, rather than looking at the quarter, here's a monthly view. And this is something that's going to be perhaps more operationally relevant, for example. Level of detail and attributes. This is another part that you can find in the reporting editor that are pretty interesting. And like level of detail will be for PLAs, that's going to be account or campaign these days in the age of PMAX. If you're still using standard shopping, you have an ad group level as well. But for example, if you're looking at the account level, at your competitors on the account level, you'll probably see like 30 competitors in there. See anywhere from 10 to 60 maybe competitors typically at the account level. But you'll find when you drill down to further details, and I'll tell you about retail category in a bit, but when you drill down to these smaller levels like ad group, for example, it's going to show you a lot more of your competitor field, because these ones, maybe they're not competing with you at the account level, but they compete with you in some of your auctions. And you'll realize that you're actually competing against thousands of unique competitors. And you can find out who those are or how many you've got. And you can also chart how that number is changing over time. Is the competitive field getting crowded over time? You can also, this is quite interesting, you can look at campaign type and bid strategy type. So let's say you're evaluating PMAX and standard shopping. You can look and segment by campaign type, and you can find out, am I more effective against a key competitor with shopping or with PMAX? You can also look at your bid strategy type and figure out like, okay, is let's just say target ROAS versus manual bidding, which one is more effective against my competitors? That's possible by adding those dimensions in there. And here's just an example. This is a benchmark value, but you could do this on your own, like for campaigns or so on. But here I wanted to understand in general, is performance max or standard shopping with smart bidding, which one is more effective in the auctions? So remember, we're looking at competitor power right here. So higher is bad. And so we see that PMAX has a slightly lower range than standard shopping. PMAX is slightly more effective at competition, but nothing earth-shattering either. Standard shopping is not, I wouldn't say materially worse at competitiveness, but there is a difference. Device is another level that you can look at. And this is just an example. Here I've split out ad group. You could also look at retail category if you're using Performance Max to get a really granular view. But here I wanted to understand for this advertiser, does it matter like what's going on with Amazon's position per device? So all these dots, in this case, so standard shopping, all these dots represent ad groups, right? And you can see this is that framework that we looked at the start. Up and to the right is bad. You can see that Amazon is way more dominant on mobile, and tablet is a part of it, but we're mostly talking about mobile data. And on desktop, you can see that Amazon, there's this band over here that's a lot weaker. The overlap is less. There's plenty of data up there too, up and to the right, but you can see that desktop works for this advertiser. It's an area where they might want to invest more. Desktop is important for them. They face less pressure from Amazon. That was a B2B advertiser in that case. So desktop is also a good fit for their target audience as well. Retail category, I just want to stimulate you a bit here. I bet you never tell me in the questions and answers if I'm wrong, but I bet you never looked at retail category and auction insights. And it's super cool because it's mapped, like the screenshot here is just a little snippet of the huge product taxonomy that Google has. It's like 5 levels deep, and there's a lot of top level categories in there. So it's ultimately tons and tons of subcategories. And in Auction Insights, you'll see retail category. It's based on the search term. It's not based on your product in that case. It's based on the search term for that auction. And you can drill all the way down to 5 levels deep. Yeah, typically retail category data doesn't work with PMAX. Retail categories in beta. It's also not available by API or anything like that, or GACL. But it does work with, even with PMAX in Auction Insights. And so that makes it pretty special in my opinion. And just to show you what kind of crazy stuff is available in here, you know, this is a weekly time series for pacifier wipes, a super specific product group. Basically, it's a deeper retail category level, and you can get down to these product groups or the search terms related to those product groups, and you can see your level of competitiveness or how strong your competitors are over time in an area like that. So if you suddenly find that you're struggling with a certain category, you can troubleshoot that using Auction Insights or try to understand why. And that's pretty handy because, you know, when people were using standard shopping campaigns more, we had these more granular campaign builds. But people are building less with less granularity than before these days. So you might have in the past had like campaigns or like ad groups per product type, level 2, or who knows what. But this is a way of getting toward that data again, helping understand competitiveness at these deep product type levels. So I'm a big fan of using retail category data for Auction Insights. Here's another view of how you can do that. This is once again that competitor matrix showing overlap rate and inverse outranking. And you can see at these rather deep levels, like what's going on with hardware fasteners up and to the right compared to wire terminals and connectors. This is all stuff that you can visualize and understand. And I don't know, typically the stuff that I see online, people will show like a time series of impression share. And there's so much more you can do with that data. So I want to inspire you. I hope I do. Another topic here, just looking at the time, we're at 38 minutes. Okay, I'll try to keep this quick. We're getting through. Is this idea of like friendly fire. And what I mean here is how your own data can be reflected, basically. So for example, here's that same framework from before, but it's reframed slightly. This is, imagine that you have 2 brands operating in the same market. And I think of them a little bit differently. Basically, I think of like, are we talking about cousins over here with like a more distant relationship, or are we talking about twins where there's a high degree of overlap between these brands and they're really twin brands? Because the higher the overlap between similar brands in the same market, this could arguably it could turn into brand cannibalism. And then the next question is like, who's stronger here? So I've got this between weaker and stronger cousins and weaker and stronger twins. And what actually would concern me in a situation like this is when there's a high degree of similarity. You've got twin sibling brands, and it's not clear who's stronger. Because at that point, you don't know, like there's no clear winner. Otherwise, you'd say, okay, listen, that brand is dominating. That's fair enough. Let's double down on that brand. Or, you know, you could make a different decision, but let's say you go that way. But if you get into this area where they're very similar to each other and it's not clear who's winning, that's the point to me where these brands are really cannibalizing each other. So this is an example based on some real data. I've redacted it, but it's 2 health and beauty brands. They're both competing for attention and eyeballs and clicks in the UK. And you can see that indeed some of these campaigns, in this case, the bubbles are campaigns and the bubble size is revenue. You can see that there is some revenue that's in this cannibalization zone. So at that point, you can look at those campaigns, look at the products that are contained in them, and start to make some strategic decisions like, is there one that we should preference over the other? Like if you look at this blue bubble, it's a big bubble. There's a lot of revenue bound up with that. It's not concerning. You know, there's clearly a dominant one. The overlap is not that high. It's not that bad, but I hope that makes sense. Um, and another example, let's look at how you can use auction insights to understand, imagine that you are a brand that, and this is again, real data. You are a brand that is advertising through marketplaces, that you've got retail partners and you've got competitors. You can see how those different channels all pop up in Auction Insights. Like here are your retail partners in this purple color. And you can see that generally your retail partners are not that strong. So that becomes a question. Do we want to invest in co-marketing here and strengthen their position? Or if we are already investing in co-marketing, is that working? That's a question that you can look at here. You can understand what's going on with your partners. Or if you're looking at marketplaces, which ones of these are you advertising on? Here's Amazon over there. That big one way farther away from everyone else. That's Amazon. I'll de-anonymize that for you. But these are the kind of things that you can look at. And again, you can add color as a dimension here to just help make this picture clear so that even rather technical stuff like this can be understandable to the executive team with just a little bit of explanation and the proper framing. So that's the main content that I want to present. I do have one PS. I had a couple prefaces and I've got one PS. And it's sort of awkward. The question arises like, to what extent are Google auctions even real auctions anymore? And yeah, I'll just put all the text at once. Please don't read it right now. You can read it later. Okay, you're going to get the slides. But unfortunately, late last year, we found out that Google has been manipulating search auctions through different practices. This includes like increasing basically the minimum CPC or the floor bid, which is called a reserve price increase. And they do that through indirect means like ad rank. It also includes practices like randomized generalized second price auctions, RGSP, which basically means that there are cases where they're randomly switching winners and runner-ups. And they also conducted a practice called squashing, which helps, again, simulate auction pressure and increase CPCs. And so I raise that because it is concerning what's going on out there. But Auction Insights do remain our best window into what's happening in auctions. I recorded a podcast about this. You can go check my podcast called Growing E-commerce. I explain this whole topic in detail. And I just feel like I can't talk about auctions anymore without talking about what we found out from the Department of Justice investigation last year. But yes, that was it for right now. We can get into questions. There's a QR code here that you can scan if you want to follow or connect with me on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to connect too. And I'm going to, let's see, stop sharing and turn my attention over to the Q&A. There's a bunch of things in here about the volume, so I just have to get past that. There's a question, any idea, even if pure theory, on how auction PMAX overlaps or doesn't with the PLA and others? And that's pertaining, I think, to this schematic that I showed at the beginning, where we see that AI campaigns are their own category And then, yeah, PMAX has their own category of auctions, different than PLA. It's a really good question. I don't know exactly how this is done. I think it might be a case where Google is just modeling them differently in Meridian. Because from what I can tell, like we know that there's shopping data, or there's PMAX data rather in the shopping auction insights. We know that it's in there. So yeah, the PMAX data is in there, just like the shopping data. It's not somewhere else. It could be that's referring to other kinds of auctions that PMAX is participating in, or it could be that Meridian, for some reason, chooses to model them differently. How much data is the parallelogram based upon? Thanks for asking that. I meant to mention that's not a benchmark in that case. That is based on one large account. I've run that parallelogram for more accounts, though, and I see it looks similar between different accounts, but that's anecdotal. And someone was asking if that's based on if this can be done with the data of one account. Again, they're asking about the parallelogram. Yes, it can be done with one account. That was based on one account. Although you want to have enough data in there. So there's different ways that you can generate more data. For example, looking at days of data will generate more rows of data. It's a whole topic how to produce a parallelogram like that, though. You can write me on LinkedIn if you like. Someone asked, they don't understand how conversion rate correlates with competitor metrics. So maybe I explained that poorly, but typically, when you're overlapping with competitors more, you'll see that that's occurring in entities, days, however you split it out. You'll see that that's occurring where conversion rate is higher, if that makes sense. So basically, auctions where conversion rate is higher seem to have higher overlap. It suggests that just more advertisers are competing for those auctions. I hope if I explain that better. So someone asked, if a competitor pops up in your shopping auction insights, does that mean they appeared in the buy box or the first 4 to 5 listings when the user searched? Yeah, I'd have to see, like, basically, did they get a visible impression or not? Because there's also like these hidden impressions, but they participated in the auction. That's what the overlap. We can double check in the Google documentation, but if they're showing up in your auction insights, it means they were in the auction with you. And does outranking mean you appeared further to the left than a competitor? That's exactly what that means. In that case, someone has asked me before if this is the same in like Hebrew or Asian languages that read from right to left. I don't know the answer, but the standard means that it appeared that they're in a leftmost position, means that they're outranking you. And what happens if a user scrolls using the arrows? I think that they're just by virtue of being in the auction at all, they're included. I don't think it has to do with the visible impressions. Someone asks, do you think Amazon being more visible on mobile tells us anything? Is it a function of mobile being the standard device now? This was based on data of one advertiser. And as I mentioned, that advertiser is a B2B advertiser, and they were prioritizing desktop. It's a chicken or the egg thing. Like it could be that they were, now, but the overlap was lower too. I'm thinking a lot here. I don't know if you can read into too much because there's different ways of viewing this. Is it because Amazon is bidding more aggressively on mobile? That's a possibility. Is it because this advertiser was bidding less aggressively on mobile? It's also a possibility. I'd have to dig into that more. Can you elaborate on how you analyze sibling cannibalization? Are the data outranking, share, and overlap relative to each other on brand level? So yeah, basically, you can go into each brand's auction insights and you will see how each brand views the other one. So Yeah. Basically, um, you can only see the view or the perspective of one brand at a time. But yeah, it'll be relative to each other in the auctions. It's not at the brand level per se, because these are not only brand auctions, it's all of the auctions that they participate in. Hope that makes sense. Um, Sorry if I'm rushing through. There's still a lot of questions. I want to cover as many as possible. You can always write me afterwards or whatever. Um, so our main challenge outside of CPC inflation is how much of our share we lose due to rank. How can we um, how can we counteract that? Um, yeah, I mean, certainly a part of your impression share loss to rank will be a part of your rank is the cost per click, and so these two things can be related. You know, if you find that CPCs are increasing and you can't keep pace with that inflation because it's not profitable for your business, then the result will be that you're going to start losing ad rank and losing impression share. But how can we counteract that? We can think that through together because it's a bit more in depth, because there are, of course, other factors that feed into your ad rank. But that's a challenging intersection of trends. If you find that CPCs are getting painfully high and you're losing ad rank, that's tough, to be honest, but we can talk about that. Oh yeah, so next question. How are the auction insights inside Google Ads different from competitive visibility in Google Merchant Center? Thanks for mentioning that. I meant to include a slide about that. So if you go in your Merchant Center, you'll also see these competitive visibility metrics there too, and they're pretty cool. There are two tabs in there. One is the top advertisers or most visible people, and it's neat because it's the absolute value basically, or excuse me, in that case, it's like the absolute rank of them. So you'll see that Amazon is number one, Shein is number two, and et cetera, going down in the list. And you can also you can toggle between organic, paid, or total visibility. So it's really neat to understand who are the biggest advertisers in a given market and vertical combination. So it could be like fashion in Germany or electronics in the UK. It's a great view. The other one is people with similar visibility to yourself. And it's cool because, again, it's like you can see there basically that the absolute amount of impressions, it's indexed, but you can see how many more, how many more impressions did they really get than you over time, and it's quite interesting in that way. But the problem, in my opinion, they'll also, if you look down, there's a table below the chart, and you'll see like the overlap rate in these auction insight metrics, and you'll find that the people with similar visibility to you are not necessarily the people you're most competitive with. Having similar visibility to you doesn't mean that they're in similar auctions to you. So you kind of need to filter that to find out, okay, of these similar ones, which ones are relevant to me? And then it's interesting to look at those ones. I hope that makes sense. It's hard to explain without the user interface open. Let's see. How do you get access to the retail category insights that was mentioned? Is this in beta? This is one of those funny beta metrics. It's like you can view it. Just go into the reporting tab, go to predefined reports, go to shopping auction insights, and then just there's a little search bar for the metrics and type in retail category, and you'll find it. And you can drag it in up all the way down to retail category 5. And it's not a closed beta. The thing is that, like, for example, conversions with cart data is another example. There are these metrics that sometimes spend years living in kind of a halfway status. They're not supported by the API. Like recently, conversions with cart data became supported, but you can go, anyone can see it. Do you know of any public scripts to efficiently download historical auction insights data? There's a great script from Optimizer that's been around for years, and it's a cool one. Check it out. From Frederick Velez at Optimizer, if you want to use scripts. But again, what you actually have to do, if I remember right, Since this stuff, like I think you have to download the report yourself, and then the script basically visualizes it for you. Your better bet might be to use Looker or Looker Studio, if you're looking for a way to do this efficiently rather than a case-by-case basis. Do you know if the retail category beta is available in all markets? So similar to the last question, yes. From what I've seen, it's available in all markets. There's also, it's confusing because there's also category. You can't confuse retail category and category, but category is not compatible with auction sites. But I've never had a problem with retail category per market or anything. Let's see. Other than the bid, what factors affect ad rank the most? How does site speed affect the ad rank? Well, boy, now you're calling me out. I have to go into my ad rank documentation, but it's like, because basically your landing page quality or your landing page relevance, this is going to be important. I'd have to dig into a bit more, like if site speed affects it or not. I'm honestly not sure, but basically, in a nutshell, Google is trying to understand how well the user's intent is likely to, or like how well your ad and the user's intent match each other, so that they're not just pushing out garbage ads that are not relevant to the user. And it's also like, so for them, it's satisfying their customer experience. And it's also about maximizing the predicted clicks, because of course, for them, it's a yield optimization game. They want to get as many clicks as they don't want to just shovel out impressions in these auctions. They want these auctions to get clicked so they can collect, because no one's paying for the impressions. So they really want to make sure that the competitors appearing in, that are actually getting the impressions are serving that query, because that's going to serve their end user, and it's going to then also get a click for Google so they can collect profit. But I'm sorry, just checking the Google documentation about that, or write me on LinkedIn so I can answer with more time. We're in the last 3 minutes. Someone asked if this webinar was pre-recorded. No. The last bit about Google manipulating auctions. So let's see. Has a benefit to advertisers been noted? Sorry, guys, I'm just reading this through. It's a complicated question. I mean, there could be a benefit to advertisers from some of these practices, to be fair, like RGSP, the sense of that, where they're randomizing, like Google is trying to find very dominant advertisers like Amazon or Booking. And, Amazon does great on AdRank. AdRank is not a tool that you can use to throttle Amazon somehow. So they need another tool in the toolbox. So what they do is they take a certain percentage of Amazon auctions, and they put someone else in the winning spot, to give someone else a chance, which at face value is good for advertisers. The problem is that Amazon will see that they're losing volume, and they're just going to spend more and bid higher. And that's not theoretical, that's known. And in fact, it's been known for many years. Yahoo, in 2010 knew about this. There's research from back then. And they found that it was revenue positive for their platform when they did this. And they found that it was more expensive for advertisers when they did this. And so Google discovered this as well, and it became a revenue tool. So I'm not a fan. I don't think that it's beneficial to advertisers, no. But I understand the question. So, do you know if changing your display name in the merchant center will change how others view you in competitor metrics? Yeah, I think if you're looking at historical sets, I'm not 100% sure, but I think so. But typically, like you might see, if an advertiser is using like 5 comparison shopping services, for example, you can see like 5 different versions of them in there, which is interesting to look at. Which works better in shopping, manual bidding or target ROAS? Come on now, I can't answer that question. Um, it's getting off topic, but target ROAS is working really well in our experience. Manual bidding needs to be done correctly. That's a very detailed topic. It's not in the scope of this of Auction Insights. Excuse me. Um, yeah, I'm sorry, but there's a lot more questions here. We ran out of time. I did the best I could. Thank you so much for joining me. I've got the names for some of you, not all of you, and I try to follow up with the questions if I can. Thank you so much for your time.